Selamat malam, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, kawan-kawan Historia yang menyimak acara ini dimanapun Anda berada. Seperti biasa, Dialog Sejarah hadir di channel HistoriaID, dan kali ini cukup spesial karena biasanya tamunya cuma satu orang, tapi kali ini tamunya ada 4 orang. Ya, dan juga tidak hanya di tidak hanya di Jakarta di studio di kantor historia.id, tapi juga ada di Amsterdam. Malam ini kita akan berdiskusi santai, ngobrol-ngobrol dengan tamu-tamu orang-orang hebat kami ini, dan diskusi akan menggunakan dua bahasa Indonesia dan Inggris atau bahasa campur-campur gitu ya, supaya lebih kita rileks dan santai dalam berdiskusi. Sebelumnya juga tadi sudah diperlihatkan bagaimana sejarah hubungan Indonesia-Belanda dalam perspektif kebudayaan, dan juga pada malam ini kita akan diskusi tentang peran penting dari Erasmus Huis sebagai pusat kebudayaan Belanda yang juga menjadi jembatan ya, yang menghubungkan kebudayaan dua bangsa, dua negara yang pada masa lalu juga berbagi sejarah, ada cerita sejarah hitam putih, dan juga kita bicara tentang berbagai aspek dalam sejarah dan dalam kaitannya dengan kedudukan ataupun peran penting Erasmus Huis. So the first arrival of the Dutch to the Nusantara archipelago was in the 16th century when the quest of spices brought them to the Eastern Hemisphere. Since then, the relation between Indonesia and the Netherlands inevitably became the dark side in the history of colonialism in Indonesia. However, behind the black-white history is another side that is essential and fascinating to know: the establishment of the cultural connection between the two nations that created a new culture in Indonesia during the colonial era. As a country where the civilization of many nations intersect, the traces of the cultural connection between the Netherlands and Indonesia are still evident these days, from the culinary to language aspect. Since the Indonesian independence on 17 August 1945, more effort were made to establish a closer connection between the two nations, especially in the area of culture and history. Behind the cultural collaboration promotion, there is a pivotal role of Erasmus Huis as the Dutch cultural center in Indonesia that existed since 1970 to bridge the collaboration between the two nations. So here in studio, I have a 3 plus Remco in Amsterdam. I have a 3 special guests. First, Mbak Sadia Bonstra, or Dr. Sadia Bonstra. Mbak Sadia is a historian and also heritage expert. And then Mas Bondan, halo Mas,
ya.
Apa kabar Mas?
Baik.
Mas Bondan is also a historian and the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities
Yeah.
in University of Indonesia, and Christopher Reinhardt,
Halo Mas.
historian and researcher, who is now working for Nanyang
Technological University.
Okay.
Oh,
And we also have a Remco Vermeulen from Amsterdam. Halo Remco.
Hello.
Remco is advisor for Dutch culture, and he will join us to discuss and to share your perspective, your thought about the significant role of Erasmus Huis in Indonesia to bridge the cultural relation between the two people, the two nations. Okay, maybe I will start from Mas Bondan. Mas, could you please share to us about the historical context behind not only Erasmus Huis maybe, but also what is the historical context between the Dutch and Indonesia?
Ya, terima kasih. Thank you Pak Kang Boni. I think the relation between Dutch and Indonesia is quite complex ya. because at the first when the Dutch came to Indonesia, actually their interest is to do trade, especially in spice trade in Indonesia. But through the time, they become closely have an interaction with the local people. So that's why a lot of influence between the Dutch and Indonesia. They influence each other. So that's why if we talk about how the relation between the Dutch and Indonesia, it is need to be explained in many other aspects, not only in political aspect, but also in economy and also especially in culture. A lot of things that in culture we are influence each other.
Yeah. So I almost forget to say that actually that is the purpose of this project, right? Because we have we conduct a survey and also research, and also we publish at least 4 articles, and also we also produce 4 videos about the historical context of the relation between Indonesia and the Netherlands, and then also the significant role of Erasmus Huis. So thank you, Mas Bondan. And Chris, I wanted to hear from you about what is actually, I mean, could you please share how the young generation seen the relation between Dutch and Indonesian? Because if we back maybe in 1950s, for instance, many youngsters would see the Netherlands or the Dutch as a enemy, So, what happened today with the young generation?
What happened to them now? Well, I think because I was born in 1998, so I think I can say for my generations. So I think it will be an interesting view to see that the Indonesians generations today is not really attached to that view anymore.
Okay.
I see that there are so many young generations try to see behind the black and white of colonial history. So they want to know what happened, what is the motivations of the Dutch to colonize this country, and what happened when they colonized this country. Was they only hanya menjajah,
to colonize,
exploitations, atau mereka juga melakukan sesuatu yang baik? Young people are very keen to know about this.
So they move beyond black and white, historical narration, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes we only, for instance, my generation, I was taught by my history teacher about Belanda, always from the black page, from the dark side, and then in the other hand, we also know that there is hitam putih, there is a white area, but in between, there is also gray area. So that's sometimes ignite people to discuss about this theme, this topic. So what do you think, Mbak Sadia, as a historian, as someone who being involved in many activities here, heritage, so museum? Can you please share?
Yeah, thanks.
And you have experience being the curator of the exhibition in Erasmus Huis, right?
I was about to start with that, like fun fact. I actually worked at the Erasmus Huis. I curated 2 exhibitions for them, but I was also working at Erasmus Huis for 1 year as a policy advisor. I think this was 2015. So that was just when I sort of really moved to Jakarta. But other than that, as a historian, as a cultural historian, I'm really interested in cultural dynamics of history, but also very much like Mas Bondan was just saying, this cultural interaction has always happened, of course, since the Dutch came to Indonesia, first for trade, but then later with the intention to really colonize and build a colonial state in the Indonesian archipelago. the one cannot be seen separate from the other. So cultural interaction is also always happened in parallel to the political developments in the archipelago as well. So I think that for me is something really interesting, because that exactly also shows Christopher's point, like nothing is black and white, like in a way. There's nothing that is clearly black and white. There's always gray areas. There was an appreciation for Indonesian culture, but at the same time, it was also used as a way of knowledge production in order to be able to exploit the Indonesian archipelago in a better and a more efficient way. So the one cannot be separated from the other. And for me, what is interesting is to really understand the dynamics that are fundamental to that.
Yeah, thank you. But sometimes we can also found certain people being critical, you know, to the history of Dutch colonialism in Indonesia.
Yeah.
You, maybe three of you, have a perspective or thought to share about it, or I don't know, opinion about it.
Yeah, I think there is no problem with criticism about the Indonesian and Dutch relation, because this is also how we can see also as a relation that have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
We are actually shared history together.
Yeah.
But in other way, we also in several period of our history, in several occasion, we also fight each other.
Yeah.
And also a lot of things happened during the relation that lasted about more than 300 years. So that is a normal, I think. The criticism is a normal thing, I think.
So
yeah, and if I may add, I think it's also really necessary. We have to be critical to the colonial past. There is no other way to do that. But for me, if I say like the understanding the dynamics is also exactly that. We have to understand, why did the Dutch come here? Like that was in the first place in the interest of trade, but then it was so interesting that they decided to exploit the country, not just the country, but its people, the landscape, everything, all of the resources that were there. So I do feel like, it is necessary to be critical.
Okay. Now, I want to hear your thought, your perspective, Remco. What do you see about the future collaboration between the two people, between the two nations, Indonesia and the Netherlands, especially when we see the significant role of Erasmus Huis being the bridge between the two nations, especially in the cultural aspect?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and very nice to hear you talk about this historical relationship between our two countries. I think Erasmus Huis is head as a cultural center of the Dutch embassy in Jakarta is quite a unique place. There is only one cultural center as such that is part of a Dutch embassy. When you look at other places in the world, there's no such a center. And that basically also emphasizes the importance of the relationship, I think, between Indonesia and the Netherlands. Back in 2020, the Erasmus Huis celebrated its 50th birthday or anniversary since they were founded or opened up in 1970 for the first time, actually at a different location than where they are right now. In those 50 years, this cultural center has played a major role in, how can you say that? In stabilizing, normalizing, but also in strengthening the relationship between Indonesia and the Netherlands through culture, the cultural connections that have already been mentioned by all of you actually talking before, between the people, the Dutch and the Indonesian people. But it's like Pak Bondan already said, it hasn't been an easy ride, of course. The relationship between both countries after Indonesia's independence in 1945 and then the Indonesian War of Independence between 1945 and 1949 was very bad to start with. So it took quite some effort to rebuild a new relationship in which both Indonesia and the Netherlands are equal countries rather than the former historical relationship of colonizer and colonized country. And I think we, Pak Bondan, Christopher, and we dived into this history, this history of the Erasmus Huis to learn a little bit more about why this center is unique, but also what role it has played in establishing this new relationship between two countries.
Thank you, Remco. Very interesting point. Now, maybe I wanted to ask you, Sadia. You say in the beginning that you are, experienced in organize exhibition with Erasmus Huis.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Was that the Banda? Something about Banda?
There was my first exhibition was about Diponegoro actually, and sort of Dutch perspectives on Diponegoro, but not the usual perspectives that the Dutch usually would have about Diponegoro, but actually perspectives that counter the views of Diponegoro as a rebel, but really like an appreciative view of basically his genius and the way in which he was leading the resistance movement. But the other one, the second one, was indeed the one about Banda, where we focused on the Treaty of Breda, in which Banda was exchanged for New York. Yeah, in order for the Dutch to be able to gain a monopoly on the nutmeg trade in Banda. So that first was being able to happen, indeed with the support of Erasmus Huis. So there was first a small exhibition of replicas and copies of archival material about Banda that was exhibited in Erasmus, and then I think we also organized a discussion with yourself and with some other esteemed colleagues about the historical value of this treaty and its place today, what legacies it still has for what Banda in Indonesia is today. So I think it's like you say, and also what Remco is saying, Erasmus Huis is still within Jakarta and within Indonesia. It's a venue, we don't have that many venues for public discussions, for exhibitions, there's still a lack of that in a sense in Jakarta. So it's really great that there is a venue like that where and that they are open also, I feel, increasingly to a more critical approach to the colonial past, but also find ways to, the trick is of course to not get stuck in this critical assessment or reassessment of the past, but find ways to move forward. And I think Erasmus Huis today is really moving towards that direction. How can we, rebuild this relationship, and especially for the younger generations, in the end, it's not for us, but for the younger generations who really need to, get something out of this in a different way.
So it is like a cultural hub, if I can, say that. Erasmus Huis, of course, inside the Dutch embassy, but it can become a cultural hub where people can meet each other, and even artists, cultural activists, they can present, they can perform there. Even, curator, historian like you can organize, exhibition.
Yes.
And the exhibition was even about the dark side of Dutch colonial history. So what do you think, Chris, about the important role of Erasmus Huis as a cultural hub, where people meet artists, activists, historians,
Yeah, okay. I think this is an important message for Indonesians, so I think I'll answer Indonesia, because this is quite exciting, I think, for Indonesians. Jadi Erasmus Huis, kalau kita lihat dari beberapa artikel yang diterbitkan Historia, itu dia mengubah program-programnya sepanjang zaman. Di awal, ketika dia baru dibuka tahun 1970, dia hanya menyajikan kebudayaan-kebudayaan klasik, musik klasik, wayang, pemutaran film-film Belanda. Tapi kemudian kita tahu dari manajer program Erasmus Huis yang baru pensiun, Bu Suni, dia mengatakan bahwa sepanjang zaman setiap dekade itu berbeda. Jadi di dekade awal itu dia ada klasik, kemudian dekade selanjutnya itu musik pop, kemudian dekade sekarang bahkan ada EDM, ada konser EDM, dan juga hal yang menarik dari Erasmus Huis adalah dia mengajak dua pihak untuk berkolaborasi. Jadi biasanya akan ada artis dari Indonesia, artis dari Belanda, mereka bertemu bersama, kemudian mereka melakukan kolaborasi menciptakan karya-karya baru. Dan ya saya pikir itu hal yang sangat menarik untuk anak-anak muda Jakarta apalagi. Dan di antara anak-anak muda Jakarta, Erasmus Huis cukup terkenal. Gitu. Kalau mau nonton konser, kita pergi ke Erasmus Huis. Kalau mau nonton EDM, artis dari Belanda datang ke Indonesia, Erasmus Huis juga menjadi tempatnya.
Okay.
Karena semua kegiatan di Erasmus Huis itu juga free ya, gratis.
Betul.
Ya, itu juga penting.
Itu free.
Membantu.
Ya, membantu kan.
Ya.
Bagaimana menurut Mas Bondan tentang Erasmus Huis memberikan tempat, they give a place, venue untuk young generation, untuk artis, seniman, banyak lah profesi lain dalam bidang kebudayaan ini untuk berkegiatan di sana. Dari riset-riset yang Anda lakukan.
Ya, baik. Ini saya kira pendekatan yang sangat menarik ya. Artinya Erasmus Huis bisa menangkap ya bahwa hubungan Indonesia dan Belanda tidak harus selalu bersifat formal. Artinya pendekatan-pendekatan yang sifatnya lebih budaya itu adalah jauh lebih kena atau lebih tepat sasaran daripada menggunakan pendekatan-pendekatan diplomatik misalnya. Karena isu antara Indonesia dan Belanda ini sangat kuat diwarnai oleh berbagai hal yang sifatnya sensitif. Karena kedua negara ini punya hubungan yang panjang, yang tidak selalu mulus, sehingga untuk bisa mengatasi sejarah yang panjang yang mungkin banyak sekali di sana-sini ada satu ingatan-ingatan yang mungkin membawa kepada hal-hal yang negatif, itu bisa dikurangi dan kemudian bisa justru dikuatkan melalui satu hubungan budaya yang memang selama ini antara Indonesia dan Belanda itu sudah terjalin di luar daripada konteks hubungan kolonialisme yang 300 tahun lebih itu. Sebetulnya orang Indonesia dan orang Belanda itu memiliki banyak sekali pengalaman bersama bagaimana membentuk budaya masing-masing, sehingga sampai hari ini kita bisa melihat pengaruh Belanda di Indonesia, tetapi juga sebaliknya pengaruh Indonesia di Belanda itu juga sangat kuat. Dan saya kira kalau kita mendekati itu dari aspek seperti yang dilakukan oleh Erasmus Huis, ini saya kira strategi yang jitu ya untuk mendekatkan Indonesia dengan Belanda, alih-alih daripada menggunakan diplomasi secara konvensional. Gitu.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question, but we should have been invite someone from Erasmus Huis, because I wonder why this cultural center named after Erasmus, not Van Gogh. Huis, or maybe Rembrandt Huis. Do you have information about it? Why this cultural center named after him, named after Erasmus instead, Rembrandt or Van Gogh, for instance?
Yeah. So Erasmus, I will explain, is a Dutch philosopher from the 17th century. Sadia, correct me if I'm wrong.
16th century.
He is known for the texts that he wrote, and the philosophical texts that he wrote were very from a humanities perspective. Yes. So really looking at human beings as equals, quite open-minded, especially for that time, for his time. So I think that is the reason why the Erasmus Huis got its name, to be like a place where people can meet together and where they can share ideas and thoughts, a little bit like the critical thinking space that Sadia already mentioned. So in that sense, and Erasmus is a very well-known figure in Dutch history. So for example, you also have university. The university in Rotterdam is called Erasmus University. There is the Erasmus Bridge in Rotterdam. He was originally from Rotterdam. So it is quite a big figure in the Netherlands. But yeah, this idea of open-mindedness, people as equals, that's the reason why Erasmus Huis got its name.
Yeah, may I add something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
Actually, the Dutch officials who opened Erasmus also mentions about the similarity between Erasmus quality and Indonesian people quality. So, I'm not sure who is the name of the Dutch official. It is in the article. I think you need to read the article.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he or she said that the name also represent Indonesian people's quality. Characteristic of the Indonesian people, open-minded and welcoming to the everyone. Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to spoil the article.
The ambassador at the time, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was actually the Dutch ambassador at the time who said that.
Oh.
You will read it indeed in the articles.
Yeah. I read it in the article.
Yeah. It's interesting. And do you have any opinion about the transformation that's being done by the Erasmus Huis for the last decades? As Chris said, that every period, Erasmus Huis has a different focus. Yeah. So what about the transformation that being done by the Erasmus Huis for the at least last 5 years? I don't know. What do you think? Remco?
So basically what Erasmus Huis has been doing is they have basically kept up with the time and with the interests of people in Indonesia. So you see, but also interest in the Netherlands. So you see, for example, in the beginning when Erasmus Huis was just opened in the 70s, there was a very strong focus on the Dutch language. So there were still quite some people in Indonesia who could speak Dutch, people who had been received Dutch education during the colonial period. So there was, for example, very important element of the Erasmus Huis at that moment was and still is the library, which is a place where you can read Dutch language books and magazines, but also borrow them, or you can just sit there and read them through them in the reading room. So that was initially a very important focus on the Dutch language and Dutch literature. But you see gradually that the programming was really diversifying, and Chris already gave some examples of that earlier. And also, I think because the relationship between Indonesia and the Netherlands has been maturing in the past years, you can also see that in the types of exhibitions or discussions that are being supported by Erasmus Huis, like Sadia already mentioned before. So you can really, basically, if you would look at how the programming of the Erasmus Huis has evolved, that also tells you something about how the relationship between the two countries, Indonesia and the Netherlands, has been evolving. So yeah, you see now, for example, also that the programming of the Dutch of the Erasmus Huis not only focuses on cultural topics, but also more on topics related to that. So, for example, climate change or human rights. So it's really broadening in that sense.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from from Postakana in bahasa Indonesia. Izin bertanya Kak, maybe this is for you Chris, because she or he call one of us as a Kak or brur. Izin bertanya Kak, may I ask you about, bisakah kasih contoh? Do you have any example about Indies culture? What is Indies culture and what is the example from this culture? Mas Bondan,
okay,
Kak Bondan.
Kak Bondan.
Ya, Kak Bondan. Ya. Okay, ada contohnya nggak?
Oh, banyak
Maybe
sekali.
You can say in bahasa Indonesia.
Ya, banyak sekali. Jadi Indies ini adalah satu perpaduan budaya yang merupakan pengaruh dari Belanda dan Indonesia yang bertemu dalam konteks dunia kolonial. Jadi karena itu budaya Indies sangat kuat bernuansa Belanda dan Indonesia, di mana kedua unsur budaya ini saling menguatkan sebetulnya di dalam budaya Indies. Sebagai contoh dalam bidang arsitektur rumah begitu ya. orang Belanda membawa berbagai ide, gagasan tentang bagaimana cara membangun rumah yang mungkin sesuai dengan apa yang ada di Belanda. Tapi ketika mereka melihat rumah di Indonesia yang ternyata juga sangat sesuai dengan iklim tropis di Indonesia, nah mereka mengadaptasi sehingga terjadilah perpaduan yang luar biasa indahnya di dalam gaya bangunan arsitektur di dalam rumah-rumah orang-orang Belanda yang tinggal di Indonesia, sehingga rumah ini memiliki karakteristik yang mungkin secara teknologi ketika itu sangat maju misalnya karena dibangun dengan fondasi dan segala macam struktur yang kuat, tetapi juga memperhatikan iklim Indonesia sehingga punya atap yang landai dan segala macam sehingga nyaman dihuni untuk daerah tropis, dan ini menjadi karakteristik dari perpaduan antara budaya Indonesia dan Belanda ketika itu ya. Jadi rumah-rumah Indis ini sangat khas ya, yang mungkin hanya bisa ditemui di seluruh dunia hanya di Indonesia.
And that is the architectural aspect
yes.
of the Indis culture.
Yes.
Then we have more than
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Also about the language.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, asbak,
Yeah.
knalpot,
Yeah. Pensiun.
wire, pensiun.
Yeah.
And then even
And
we have even more than that. And then kakhuis, kakus.
Yes.
Yeah. Betul kan?
Ya, betul. Bagus.
Baru tahu.
Iya. Tafelaken.
Yeah.
Oh ya, taplak.
Taplak,
Taplak.
handuk.
Yes.
And then do you have maybe information about the culinary aspect of the Indis Indis culture?
Yeah, I think we already showed it in our
the
videos.
Rice-tafel, right?
Rice-tafel, yeah.
But that is not food, right? That is
No,
the
that is the way
how
you eat.
people serving
food.
the foods.
Right.
That's culinary, and then language, and then what else? I don't
Well,
know. maybe-
actually, in culinary, it's not only rice-tafel. We also have semur.
Oh,
We also
yeah.
have
Perkedel.
perkedel.
Perkedel, yeah.
Bitter ballen.
Remco, we are start to
Kroket.
talk
Yeah,
about
kroket.
the
Yeah.
food now.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be endless.
But that's in Indonesia.
Yeah.
If we talk in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
maybe Sadia, you remember if you found
When I
something,
grew up in
when
the
I grew
Netherlands.
up, when you grew up in the Netherlands.
Yeah, of course. In every village, as small as it is, there's always like a Chinese, which also serves like Indonesian food. It's always like a mix of Chinese Indonesian food, basically. There, for example, you could also get a rice tafel or a babi panggang, or like all of that type of
Sate babi.
Yeah, sate babi. That's you can find it everywhere.
And
Or
kerupuk
like
udang?
lapis, yeah, kerupuk.
Oh,
or
spekkoek.
spekkoek.
Okay.
Spekkoek, etc.
Spekkoek.
Yeah.
Oke. Tapi kenapa Mas Bondan? Tapi kenapa di Belanda
Yeah.
kebudayaan Indis atau orang-orang itu lebih kuat solidaritasnya
Daripada di Indonesia.
daripada di Indonesia? In Indonesia we can easily found people as an actor in the television.
Yeah.
But they don't they don't make any organization,
Yeah.
But in the Netherlands they seems stronger in in terms of solidarity.
Yeah.
Can you explain that phenomenon?
Yeah. Because in 1950, I think, we decided to cut everything that connected with the Dutch.
Okay.
After we are independent, so that's why all kind of organization that related to legacy of
The
that come
Dutch?
from the Dutch is not existed anymore.
Okay.
Because Indonesian people decide to create a new kind of identity. Yeah.
Oh.
But now we are realized that we cannot do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We still have a strong relation, share history with the
Netherlands, with the Dutch.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in the Netherlands, it's like because of that decision that people had to they had to decide to become either Indonesian or to go to the Netherlands. But it was not going back to the Netherlands because many of these people were born here and they didn't know anything. They knew about the Netherlands, but they'd never lived there. So for the group of Indies people who ended up in the Netherlands, it was very much also very often a traumatic experience of having to being forced to go to the mother country that they actually don't really know. So I think in that way, Indies people in the Netherlands, the communities are strongly identify as Indies people, and also because they have the same sort of like similar experiences, and also sort of like this longing to Indonesia, to a country that they're no longer allowed to be part of, or you know, they actually chose to not be part of. But it's always sort of like, a trauma. Like they were forced to make this decision, but if it was up to them, they wouldn't have to make that decision, or they would never make that decision.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's the reason why, you know, people here, I mean, Indo, people who has connection with the Dutch history, you know, they don't express, you know, they don't show up. You know? But we can actually easily find them, you know, especially in many, you know, in television, you can see them, you know.
Why and in television? Like why?
Yeah, because, you know, we have a lot of, you know, actors, movie actor. Yeah, back then in 1980s, we have even more people, you know, involved in this, you know, industry in movie.
Yeah,
maybe
because
you remember
considered good looking.
Yeah, right. Good looking. Yeah. And then maybe you remember Rudy Wawor, actually. Yeah. Who have a Dutch descendant. Yeah, sorry Remco. Remco.
No,
Please.
I was just gonna say, like, you've been talking about Indies people, and maybe it's good for the audience to explain a little bit what Indies people are. Like, who are these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, shall I?
Please.
Enlighten us.
Yeah.
No, so like you already heard before, like there have been a very long time that Dutch people have been present in Indonesia. So of course there has been mixing between Indonesian people and Dutch people as well, who got like children together. So you call somebody who has, for example, a Dutch father and an Indonesian mother, you would call this person Indies in Dutch, or you would say in English Indo-Dutch or Indo-European. So that's basically like a mixed race between the two peoples. And of course they were like, Indies people always have had a difficult but also like a very distinctive position in the colonial period in Indonesia, but also after, and that's what Sadia referred to. So you have this group, they are not fully Dutch, but they're also not fully Indonesian, so they're in the middle. They're like also a bridge, but also a difficult position to have. So after Indonesia became independent, these people had to choose, like, either stay here in Indonesia, in the country where they had been born, where their roots are, but then they had to become Indonesian, or they had to leave to the Netherlands and become Dutch citizens. And this was indeed, like Sadia already rightfully said, was traumatic for a lot of people who had to leave. So basically, the Indo people who moved to the Netherlands, they basically also lost the land that they grew up in, because Indonesia was a very different country for them as opposed to the Indonesia where they grew up in.
Thank you, Remco. Before we go too far and then move away from the substance of the discussion today, I want, a bit curious, why, by the way, thank you, Remco. By the way, a bit curious about why Erasmus Huis just, started in Indonesia in 1970, not earlier before. Any of you have a answer, information?
Okay.
Why it just, started in 1970?
Ya, saya coba jelaskan.
Not before, Kenapa?
Ya, karena ketika itu generasi pertama yang banyak berhubungan dengan Belanda, generasi awal abad 20, itu mulai berkurang. Ya, ketika itu Soekarno, Hatta mulai surut dari dunia politik, sehingga mulai muncul satu generasi baru yang ketika itu mungkin sudah siap ya untuk menerima satu hubungan yang baru dengan Belanda. Jadi segala macam hal yang stigma yang pernah ada di dalam pikiran dari orang-orang Indonesia, terutama di kalangan elit yang pernah dididik oleh Belanda, tapi punya hubungan yang sangat problematis dengan Belanda, karena mereka merasakan dampak dari kolonialisme secara langsung, itu sudah tidak lagi memegang posisi-posisi penting. Sehingga di tahun 70-an satu situasi baru ini muncul di Indonesia, yang menjadi momentum yang saya kira ini yang ditangkap oleh pemerintah Belanda untuk memulai satu hubungan yang baru sama sekali. Yang coraknya sama sekali berbeda, bukan lagi diwarnai oleh berbagai macam kenangan ataupun memori bersama tentang kolonialisme, tapi bagaimana membangun masa depan bersama yang lebih baik. Dan tahun 70-an adalah periode itu saya kira.
Jadi itu that is the reason why Erasmus Huis was started in 1970.
Yes. Yeah, I think yes.
Okay. So the post-war generation itu mulai muncul, dan juga they have a different perspective, the different opinion from generation
for example,
before.
Like all of us, I think all of us is born after 1970.
Yeah.
So we can talk like this.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine if this happened for the former generation.
Yeah.
Maybe they will difficult to talk like this.
Oh, okay, they will fight.
Perhaps, They have a lot of different in opinion and in perspective. But now we can find a lot of similarities among us.
Okay, so it is also about the generational. What you call it, generational gap.
Yes,
right?
yes, I think yes.
Okay, that's the reason why Erasmus Huis itu ada di Indonesia tahun 70, and then banyak orang mulai lebih relatively free to talk about the history, right?
And you also write about like the political change, right? The change of the political context after the 1950s and the solution for the pending colonial issues in the 1960s that gave opportunity and space to create something, to build a new relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, and then with that, probably also this regeneration of the population.
Well, bisa nggak dikatakan, Chris, bisa nggak dikatakan bahwa kebudayaan, culture is actually, we play something, safety. Because when you talk about the cultural aspect, the cultural thing, it's like, it's different when you talk about the politics, it's full of controversy, it's all about, what you call it, sometimes black and white. But when you talk about the culture, it can connect, it can bridge, two people, two nations, is that true? Why, this institution like Erasmus Huis focus on the cultural aspect.
Ya, bisa dikatakan seperti itu, tapi juga dan satu Charles d'Affaires, kuasa usaha dari Belanda waktu itu juga bilang kalau misalnya kita mau maju ke depan, membuat satu hubungan baru, lebih baik kita tidak menengok ke belakang tapi lihat yang ke depannya, dan di semangat itulah Erasmus Huis dibangun. Tapi itu tidak berarti bahwa Erasmus Huis itu main aman. Kalau kita lihat misalnya dalam salah satu di artikel ada satu event yang namanya Malam Puisi 81 yang di situ diadakan diundang penyair-penyair yang sangat kritis terhadap pemerintah Soeharto. Ada Bu Tuti Herati, kemudian Sitor Situmorang, Rendra, semua diberi ruang juga di dalam Erasmus Huis, di dalam cultural space itu gitu. Jadi ya bisa dikatakan itu juga aman, tetapi juga di sisi lain itu adalah ruang aman juga untuk orang yang mau mengkritisi pemerintah pada waktu itu.
But once they leave the gate,
well, we don't know.
Okay. You don't know what happened. Okay. I have actually more questions from the audience. I don't know, maybe this is for okay. Oh, this is also one question. Apakah di Belanda ada juga kebudayaan Indis? Apakah di Belanda ada juga kebudayaan? Maybe Sadia, you first, Sadia. Maybe, yes, as someone who grew up in the Netherlands, maybe you have experience.
Indies culture?
Yeah.
Well, I did not grow up in the Indies culture, so I'm actually not so familiar with Indies culture, but like we were discussing before, they're everywhere, like these also the Indies restaurants that sell all these Indonesian
and
food.
in
So
The
for
Hague
me,
there
that
is
was
and in The Hague there is a Indies herinnering centrum.
Yeah.
There is a question, Remco, about is there any Indies culture, what you call it, still exists in the Netherlands? As I know, there is a Indies herinnering centrum in The Hague. Do you have information or story about how the Dutch or the Indies culture exists in the Netherlands today, maybe?
Yeah, of course, there are a lot of tangible aspects, basically, that here in the Netherlands that refer to that Indies culture and to the history, the history with Indonesia. Apart from the restaurants that Sadia already mentioned, there is actually in the bigger cities such as Amsterdam, but also in The Hague, there is sometimes complete neighborhoods with street names that are called after Indonesian islands, and you call these neighborhoods the Indische buurt or the Indo neighborhood. It's not because of the people who live here, but just because at some point they just created a neighborhood with these names, referring back to Indonesia. Indeed, like you said, there is the Indies Herinneringscentrum, which is like a center for the Indo community in the Netherlands, and they organize lectures, but also exhibitions and all of that, a little bit like Erasmus Huis in Indonesia, really. Maybe it's also interesting to say that there is, and I have never seen the stats on this, but we always say in the Netherlands that there is at least 2 million out of 17 million people in the Netherlands who have a relationship with Indonesia. So either they have Indo roots, or their families have lived in Indonesia or been in Indonesia at some point. So that is quite a significant number if you look at the total people living in the Netherlands. And interestingly, there is also an exhibition in Amsterdam in the museum Het Schip, which is a museum on the architectural style, the Amsterdam school style. And this exhibition is currently on display, I think, until this summer. And basically it shows the influence of Indonesia on Indonesian elements on this very typical Amsterdam architectural style. And the organization where I work, Dutch Culture, has actually also supported this exhibition. So yeah, there is definitely quite some Indonesian traces or Indo traces in the Netherlands.
Okay, thank you. I still have a question from the audience. Maybe this one is for Mas Bondan. Apa yang membuat bangunan Belanda? What makes the building made by the Dutch itu stronger than bangunan yang dibuat oleh
orang
Indonesia. Kemudian, apakah juga bangunan baru di Belanda teknologinya sama seperti apa yang pernah dibangun ketika mereka di Indonesia, sehingga bangunan lebih kuat? Apa yang membuat bangunan itu kuat, katanya pertanyaan ini?
Baik, jadi memang orang Belanda itu punya tradisi membangun bangunan rumah berbatu. Beda dengan orang Indonesia yang biasanya membangun dari kayu. Jadi ketika orang Belanda datang ke Indonesia, mereka melihat kota Banten, Batavia, kota-kota pelabuhan yang lain. Mereka selalu katakan itu adalah sekumpulan rumah-rumah kayu. Padahal yang mereka lihat sebetulnya adalah kota. Tapi kotanya orang Indonesia ketika itu dibuat dari kayu, bahan yang paling banyak tersedia di Indonesia, karena hutan masih sangat banyak, sehingga orang membuat rumah dari kayu itu bahan-bahan tersedia secara melimpah. Nah, tetapi orang Belanda meletakkan satu tradisi yang baru ya. Sebetulnya bukan hanya orang Belanda, tapi orang Eropa juga. Sebagai contoh di Banten, ketika Banten semakin maju, Sultan Banten itu menyewa seorang ahli bangunan orang Portugis membangun istana Surosowan yang berbatu itu, sehingga itu menjadi salah satu bangunan yang terkuat yang ketika itu ada di seluruh kepulauan Nusantara misalnya. Nah, ketika Belanda menduduki Jakarta dan membangun Batavia, mereka selalu katakan semuanya dihancurkan dan di atas reruntuhan itu dibangun satu kota baru. Nah, kota baru itu adalah kota berbenteng dengan batu, yaitu adalah Batavia. Dan ini sangat kuat sehingga ketika dua kali serangan Sultan Agung 1628, 1629 tidak bisa tembus karena orang Indonesia tidak pernah melihat ada benteng yang sekuat itu.
Pakai batu ya?
Iya, dari batu-batu. Dan itu hanya dipertahankan oleh sekitar mungkin nggak sampai 1.000 orang. Dan yang menyerang itu ada 10.000. Tapi tidak bisa menembus. Nah, ini satu bukti bahwa Belanda ketika itu membuat satu struktur bangunan yang sama sekali berbeda dengan yang ada di Indonesia. Ya, Indonesia ada juga kota berbenteng di Mataram, juga di Cirebon itu dibangun kota berbenteng, tetapi tentu saja berbeda dengan apa yang dikembangkan oleh Belanda yang memang ketika itu sangat kuat gitu ya. Jadi ini saya kira bangunan-bangunan Belanda sampai hari ini sangat terkenal sebagai bangunan-bangunan yang sangat kuat dan bisa bertahan selama ratusan tahun. Satu bukti konkretnya adalah Museum Sejarah Jakarta yang didirikan tahun 1710. Itu adalah salah satu bangunan yang mungkin paling tua yang masih berdiri di Jakarta sampai hari ini.
Dan masih sangat kuat.
Masih sangat kuat dan itu buatan Belanda. Contoh.
Menarik. Ya, makasih Mas. Now I have also a question from one of the audience. Ini pertanyaannya, I don't know maybe if you have a answer for these questions. Apakah ada Pusat Kebudayaan Erasmus Huis? Is there any
Other.
Erasmus Huis office in other former colony of the Netherlands? Ada.
I don't think so. Ya, sepertinya nggak ada. I don't think
So
so.
only in Indonesia.
Only in Indonesia.
Okay.
Actually, that is what Remco explained earlier, no? Like there's actually only one Dutch cultural center in the world. Like no other embassy has a cultural center, only here in Jakarta.
Okay.
Maybe they have like a cultural attaché or a consul or whatever, but not like an actual venue. It's only here because of the special relationship.
Yes.
And because they wanted to invest in this relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, I also
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
add
please.
information about this. For example, from a Dutch study program, there is only one Dutch study program outside the Netherlands that is existed in Indonesia, in the University of Indonesia. And when the ambassador visited us about 3 months ago, he was quite surprised because the students of this program study even more than the Dutch program study in Leiden. So this is the biggest Dutch study program in the world, located in Depok in Indonesia, not in the Netherlands. Can you imagine? So the interest of young people to study about Dutch culture mostly come from Indonesian youngsters.
So how many students?
Every year about 70, more than 70.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is more than the student that
In Leiden.
Yeah, in
Leiden,
Leiden.
I can
For
imagine,
one batch. So we have the biggest Dutch study program in the world.
Okay.
The ambassador said that. Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe in Leiden people, Dutch, speaking Dutch fluently.
It's because like in the Netherlands it's like or like here, right? It's like you study Bahasa Indonesia. In the Netherlands nobody's in. Nobody, let's say not nobody, but like not that many people are interested in studying their own language. It's more interesting to study, I don't know, Spanish or Chinese or whatever, but not Dutch. Like, why would you do that? That's the general opinion in the Netherlands.
But Sadia, in Indonesia, the interest to study Dutch language and culture is very, very big.
Really interesting.
So that's why we can say that the interest to Dutch culture among the youngster growing now.
Growing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Menarik.
Little bit strange.
Yeah, menarik. So do you have something to add, Remco, about is there any, well actually, Chris has answered that Erasmus Huis only in Indonesia,
So there used to be more Dutch cultural centers elsewhere in the world, in Italy, in France, you name it. That used to be part of embassies or funded by through embassies, but most of them have been either they were closed down because there were not enough activities or there was not enough interest anymore in keeping these centers open. Other centers still exist, but their management transferred to, for example, Dutch universities. So there is a Dutch institute in Netherlands Institute in Morocco, in Turkey, in Istanbul, in Rome. But they are all either independent centers or they are, like I said, they were part of universities now funded by Dutch universities. But yeah, in that sense, Erasmus Huis is the only, like I indeed said before, is the only cultural center that is really part of a Dutch embassy, and it is still funded through the embassy and the Dutch government, like the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So in that sense, it's very unique.
Before I close the discussion, I have one more question from audience. What makes the young generation are now interested to learn Dutch? I mean, Dutch language, Dutch culture. What is their motivation? What what is their the reason why they want to learn about Dutch language or Dutch culture?
Yeah, as you said, Pak Boni, that the interest to history is now growing bigger. So that's why I think among Indonesian young people, they become knowing that Indonesian history related a lot with the Netherlands, with the Dutch. So they want to know, the shared history, the culture that they know as existed now in front of them, but they don't know what is actually the element of this culture. But after they searching in the Google or in internet, they become knowing that this aspect is also related to the history of Indonesia, and this is also related to the Dutch. So that's why now the interest to study everything that connected with the Dutch culture is growing bigger.
So Chris, is this also something related with the current situation that is more open, with the social media, young generation can, access the information from the internet, and then they want to know more about it, and then they become, highly motivated to study Dutch.
Yeah, the increasing interest toward colonial history, especially, is because of the liberalizations of sources. You can access sources very easily, and sources that you are not taught in school. You can access it through the internet. That is one thing. But I also want to add about the former question about the why the Indonesian youngsters are very interested to learn about Dutch, and even joining Dutch study program. From some of my friends who studied Dutch studies in UI, they actually see that the Netherlands today is the symbolizations of free country, liberal country, the representation of a free world, and maybe sometimes they feel that living in their situations is a bit not that free, and they want to go to the Netherlands. They want to experience the freer world. That is what I heard from some of my friends who studied Dutch, because the motivation is also to be able to come to the Netherlands.
To the Netherlands.
Yeah.
That's the motivation, right?
Yep.
Okay.
There actually is, Pak Boni, sorry, if
please.
I can add to this, there actually, I think it's also worth mentioning that there has always been a very big number of young Indonesians who actually come to the Netherlands to study, like to do their bachelor's or to do their master's, or both of them actually. So there always have been a lot of the big interest to study in the Netherlands. So I think there is probably a relation there with also the interests or the popularity of this Dutch studies program at Universitas Indonesia.
Okay, the last question for you, Remco. Is this something relate with the way, Erasmus Huis promote the Dutch culture to Indonesian?
Yeah, you basically see that I think young Indonesians are the main target audience of the Erasmus Huis activities and the programs that they organize. So they really want to engage young people. That's also one of the reasons, it was already mentioned before, that all the activities are always for free, so that it is more accessible for young people, also if they don't have the money to go to, for example, the opera or to a theater. And you see also nowadays that they are even not only focusing on youngsters, so on teenagers, but they also now focus on young, like children and families, so children and their parents. So a very nice example of that is that they have a lot of screenings of Dutch children movies, and then with Indonesian subtitles. And they recently developed a new, how do you say that, avatar called Erasmus, which is very cute. It's like a cat that basically, in very cute cartoons, explains about different disciplines and culture. So about architecture, or about art, about music. And you really see that this little cat is... You see it a lot in the social media accounts of the Erasmus Huis. So they really, indeed, try to engage as much as possible young Indonesians.
Thank you, Remco. Time flies so fast now. We are come to the end of this session, this discussion. So, thank you. Terima kasih semuanya untuk berbagi, to share your thought, experience, knowledge, and enlighten the audience with your story. Especially congratulations for the team who have been
Thank you, Pak Boni.
conducting the research, and then also the article now I think has been published in Historia since
this
weeks.
Thursday, I think. Weeks? Huh?
No, weeks.
Oh, weeks. Okay.
Yeah, this week.
Days, yeah.
Yeah, you can read, bisa baca artikel tersebut di historia.id, dan juga bisa lihat video-video yang kita buat. Sekali lagi terima kasih Chris, Mas Bondan, Mbak Sadia. Terima kasih. Saya tidak mau menyimpulkan. I want to summarize the discussion tonight. Then thank you Remco for joining us from Amsterdam.
Yes, thank you very much.
Ya, terima kasih Remco. You speak bahasa, right? Now?
Ya, terima kasih banyak.
Oke, terima kasih Remco, terima kasih semuanya sudah datang di Dialog Sejarah. Kita akan bergabung lagi nanti apabila ada tema-tema penting diskusi lain. Kawan-kawan Historia dimanapun Anda berada, terima kasih sudah bergabung dengan Dialog Sejarah. Tema spesial malam ini tentang bagaimana Erasmus Huis memainkan peranan sebagai jembatan kebudayaan dua bangsa, dua masyarakat, dan semakin merekatkan hubungan dua negara, Indonesia dan Belanda, sehingga kita tetap belajar kepada sejarah, kita tetap melihat sejarah sebagai cara untuk mengetahui kemana kita akan bergerak ke masa depan. Dan semoga hubungan kedua negara, kedua bangsa, kedua masyarakat akan semakin erat dan semakin tumbuh pengertian di antara keduanya. Terima kasih, selamat malam, jaga kesehatan selalu. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.